need any prior knowledge of statistics to understand this particular presentation, which is much more anecdotal. I'm also aware of the fact you've been sitting here very patiently all morning, and you know that lunch hour is approaching. So I'll try and rattle through my presentation as quick as possible, and perhaps suggest to Dr. Pereira that we don't need any questions, otherwise we'll never get any lunch. And since we're old colleagues from the Institute of Psychiatry, I'm sure you'll understand the need for sustenance. So, failures, I've had a few dealing with setbacks in academic life. I'm going to mention 3 areas I've failed in. Firstly, that of doing a PhD, secondly, getting published, and thirdly, getting grants. Well, there's a bit of a confessional season going on with academics. And it was partly started by Dr. Melanie Steffen, who wrote, "No scientist enjoys such failures, but too often we hide them." My CV does not reflect the bulk of my academic efforts, the exams I failed, my unsuccessful PhD or fellowship applications, or the papers never accepted for publication. At conferences, I talk about the one project that worked, not about the many that failed. And sadly, I couldn't understand whether that last paper worked or not, but I'm sure it actually did. It seemed very plausible. Another professor, associate professor from Princeton University, Johannes Haushofer, actually published his CV of failures. And he said grant applications are crapshoots, and selection committees and referees have bad days. And in his CV, he lists the degree programs he did not get into, academic positions and fellowships he missed, awards and scholarships applied for unsuccessfully, papers rejected from academic journals, and research funding he failed to get. So I just want to digress slightly to William Shakespeare. My pride fell with my fortunes from As You Like It. So, doing a PhD, if you're contemplating doing one, here's perhaps how not to do it. And our story starts in a car park at the Open University. It's not actually the Open University, but I couldn't actually get a photograph of the car park there. But it followed a meeting with my 2 supervisors at the time, who gave me a choice. And the choice was this: would you like to suspend your studies for a year, or would you like to drop out of your PhD because you're not making the grade? So I sat in the car and I shed a few tears and decided, yes, perhaps a PhD at that time wasn't for me. So what actually went wrong with the PhD? Well, I chose the wrong topic, social skills training with chronic psychiatric patients. It was the wrong client group. They couldn't fill out our psychology questionnaires. There were problems in generalization of the skills. My supervisors were far away, and I had 2 supervisors, so it was quite easy to play one off against the other at times, and persuade them both that I was really progressing very well when I wasn't. Conflicting demands of family and work time, and at the big asylum I worked at, which had about 600 staff, no one was actually doing a PhD. So it really was, as Alan Salito said, the loneliness of the long-distance runner. So after the setback, I decided to stop worrying and start researching. And I involved myself in a lot of various research projects in that asylum. And unlike the mortuary, where patients are researched to death, at Claybury Hospital, very few patients were being researched, so there are plenty of opportunities for research there. In 1992, I moved to the Institute of Psychiatry, which is the preeminent psychiatric academic institution in the world. How I got in there, God only knows, but I did. And the psychology department at the time had Professor Hans Eysenck, who had actually retired, but he was still writing the papers, and Professor Geoffrey Gray. And when we looked at the average productivity of the psychology department, on average we were publishing about 34 papers each. Well, that's because these other two were publishing, had over 500 publications, rather like Professor Sir Simon Wesley. There's got so many citations, you can't actually calculate them. The computer crashes. So these were wonderful people. But there was an interesting sign in the department, which came from Lord Ernest Rutherford at Cambridge. And it said, "We have no money, so we will have to think." And one of the things that Dr. Pereira showed us, a wonderful project. I dread to think how much that project cost. But even in the department at the Institute, we have no money, so we will have to think. You don't always need money to do research. But being at the Institute, of course, I said, well, you better get a PhD. And when I was appointed senior lecturer in 1997, they said to me, well, unless you get a PhD, you're actually going nowhere. You won't get promoted. So this time I chose a different subject. We've already heard a bit about student stress and stress in policemen in Bangalore. Yeah. Well, having watched the traffic in Colombo, in the centre of Colombo, I thought that was stressful until I went to Bangalore. I was reassured by my PhD student that it was really quite safe, and why was I worrying about it? The next day she was involved in a car accident. So yes, a very stressful occupation that must be. So we developed a number of different measures of stress, and these are my supervisors, Professor Elizabeth Kuipers and Princess Anne there, and Dame Till White, who dropped out and was replaced by Professor David Hemsley. So we did a number of surveys of staff stress in different hospitals. We also developed interventions. So in a 10-year period, I had co-edited 2 books, wrote 17 peer-reviewed papers, and had 9 professional papers. So I actually thought I was a bit of an expert on stress, and actually the PhD viva would be a shoo-in. Unfortunately it wasn't. It proved very difficult. And it lasted 2 hours, and the outcome was, no, you're not getting a PhD, you'll have to come back, make a number of changes, and actually have another viva. And I'm just sort of quote there, "A student understands the shortcomings and has plenty of time to submit." And of course, one of the wonderful things about the Institute of Psychiatry is you've got statisticians and librarians to help you make all these corrections. So the reviva actually went well, and you're allowed to bring notes in, so I was able to give them the definition between, what's the difference between a mediator and a moderator, which to this day I'm still not fully grasped. What went right? The right topic, doing things through the training department. I'm rushing on quickly because Dr. Pereira said only 3 minutes. However, I didn't survive at the Institute because it was a case of publish or perish. And as Professor Thornycroft said to me, unless you've got 4 papers in journals and impact factor of greater than 3, you're not staying on, mate. So, the humiliation of it, I was asked to write my own resignation letter and transfer to the trust. However, they were happy days, and I spent some time doing recovery, and Professor Ho's been plugging his workshop. I'll plug mine. The recovery colleagues got a golden handshake of £450,000. Drinks are on Dr. Pereira after this, by the way. So after that, I stayed at home for a year and got a bit bored and decided to become a professor of psychology at the University of Bolton. And here we are with our eminent colleagues from Bengaluru, the Professor Shastris, and on a trip to China and giving a talk at Bolton. And these are some of my colleagues at Bolton. We happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, being ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap while any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. And we were chatting last night over dinner about how difficult academic life is in Britain nowadays, and competition in universities. Writing for publication, some thoughts by Professor Smoyak, some tips: get connected with others, try and write with other people, go for easy wins, write a letter to the editor, do book reviews, opinion pieces, know what your own blocks are. I'm going to rattle through. Peer-reviewed papers, very difficult to get. ask experienced colleagues to check them. Rejection rates can be very high. Rejection rates for the Lancet are 95%, and of the 5% that are actually accepted, they all have to make major changes to them. One of my papers came back at the second attempt with the reviewer's comments, "I never want to see this paper again." Hans Eisling, I've already mentioned him, I won't give you his anecdote. Getting grants, equally fraught. Jeffrey Gray reckoned he only got 1 in 10 grants. 1 in 10, he was probably one of the best psychologists in the world. It's a competitive world out there. John Tregonwyn, a number of suggestions how to cope with not getting your grants. And conclusion. Right, I'm there. Okay, the Olympics. What happened to China? Britain is no longer an economic superpower, but in Britain, the newspapers are full of the fact that we're now a flipping sporting superpower. And here is a lady who won gold medal in boxing in 2 Olympics, and she comes up with this wonderful quotation, "Fall down 8 times, get up 9. And this is dedicated to, strangely enough, a psychiatrist, Frank Holloway, Mayo Mucker, and Professor Kevin Gurney, a nurse. So who says psychologists don't do multidisciplinary? Goodbye. Thank you very much for your attention.